Welcome to Young Adults Learning Evil, hosted by Nyrule. Young Adults Learning Evil is a gritty documentary podcast that explores the intersectionality of class, wealth, and race, and how it has played out over the past 400 years within a community. The podcast gives the world insight into how urban trauma affects a marginalized Black community inside one of America's first planned cities, New Haven, Connecticut. New Haven is also the home of one of the world's most prestigious and powerful institutions, Yale University. Subscribe to Young Adults Learning Evil on your favorite podcast platform. Here is your host, Nyrule.
Peace, this is Nyrule, and you are listening to Young Adults Learning Evil. Today's episode, we are doing a profile piece on William Lanson. William Lanson can be considered a Black founding father of America. His feats, what he's accomplished, his character, what he represented, is something that all Black men should strive to till this day. And when you hear this story and you understand who he is, you'll see why his history has been buried and why the young Black men and women in New Haven have only started to hear his name over the past 20 years. This man was literally buried in history. Today, we will show honor to him. So, let's get to it. William Lanson was born in New Haven County in 1786. He was a fourth-generation freedman. Some sources say he was a slave. In my opinion, they say that to minimize and sensationalize his achievements. Growing up in New Haven County, post-Revolutionary War, the region saw a huge influx of free Black men and men that were inspired by the Revolutionary War veterans to petition the abolishment of slavery to free their families. These attitudes of self-determination and independence have evidently shaped William Lanson, as you can see from his accomplishments in life. So before we get into William Lanson's contributions to New Haven, I want to pull it all in together into a historical context. We know that one of the founders of New Haven was a merchant, and he always had hopes of creating a trading hub. The first Long Wharf project was a community effort where all the men in the city from the ages of 16 to 60 worked 4 days, clearing and extending the wharf. In 1663, after New Haven and Connecticut colonies merged, the government issued Sam Bach the rights to build a dock in the area where present-day State Street and Union Avenue meet. A company bought it and named it Union Wharf. They changed the name to Long Wharf, and the name has stuck to this day. The wharf was owned by John Atwater and Thomas Trowbridge. There are streets and neighborhoods in New Haven named after them to this day. After 170 years and numerous failed attempts at creating a wharf deep enough to hold large merchant ships, in 1810, William Lanson was contracted to build and extend Long Wharf by James Hillhouse, a man that once owned slaves but later became an abolitionist. He decided to contract Lanson for the pier to be extended 1,500 feet. William Lanson was crafty and was brave. He built boats called a scow, which is a flat-bottomed barge. These special ships were able to hold 25 tons of stone. He hired a crew based off his family, a lot of friends, and also escaped hostages that came from the South that was looking for work. And he quarried the rocks for the Long Wharf. They sailed them down Lake Saltonstall into the harbor. He was the only one daring to travel with a boat full of rocks down the river into the harbor, and he would even do it by himself at night. His determination paid off. When the job was completed, William Lanson just built the longest pier in America, reaching 3/4 of a mile in distance. William Lanson underbid it for the job. So after the end of it all, even though it was a fantastic feat and he was famous, he operated at a loss. But it wasn't a true loss, it was a sacrifice, because he made other people rich by opening up the ports. He put himself in a better opportunity. And he was able to purchase property and build and develop. So, the genius that he was, Lanson turned New Haven into a major commercial port, which means that boats will dock and there will be crew in need of lodging, food, and entertainment. So he purchased an old slaughterhouse and converted it into a successful hotel. Later, it became known as the Hotel Liberia, in reference to the American colony in Africa founded by intellectuals as part of the American Colonization Society, which wanted former African hostages to go to Africa. The town called the black neighborhood Liberia with a condescending tone to it. They were calling it the black neighborhood as a colony that was separate from the rest of the city. So they were saying that they were colonized people because they were away from the major part of the city. Similar to different neighborhoods in the city that are segregated and separated from the rest of the city, like the Manor and the projects out there, that was done by design. How New Horville is separated from everything that's done by design. Eastern Circle, Eastern View, they separated by design, and that's just the way that they're able to maintain and control power. William Lanson also purchased and converted old barns in that area and turned them into housing. The neighborhood was coined New Guinea, that was named after a country in Africa that has ties to many enslaved people in America. The neighborhood attracted freedmen, black war veterans, and runaway hostages that came to Connecticut looking for freedom. They lived adjacent to an Irish community called Slineyville, where both black and white residents can be seen shopping together at Lanson's establishments and passing through the neighborhoods. His wealth and notoriety did not shield him from discrimination and structural racism, though. In 1814, the Connecticut legislature, they inserted the word white into the Freedmen's Statute. This move may have been precipitated by concern that there were too many free blacks and they would register to vote as Democratic Republicans. Why would they say that? Because there was already evidence of free blacks in Connecticut voting as Democratic Republicans as early as 1803. Now that is contrary to the narratives that we usually hear, especially from the right-wing conservatives. But as we see, there's evidence that says otherwise. In 1815, Bias Stanley and William Lanson, who were two of the most prominent African Americans in New Haven, filed a petition with the General Assembly asking to be exempted from paying taxes since they had been denied the right to vote. The petition was denied. So taxation without representation was wrong when it comes to the colonies, and they died for it. But they felt it was acceptable. When slavery was abolished in Connecticut, they used systemic racism with the black codes to keep the black population disenfranchised. The cleverness and confidence of William Lanson and other black men of means in New Haven made them a threat to the established power structure. But the talents couldn't be denied. The powerful bankers in the city labeled him an enemy. William became recognized by the black community as a leader. They labeled him king. He was known to feed the sick and poor and provide opportunities for men that have newly found their own freedom. He wanted to provide opportunities for newly free African hostages that have escaped to New Haven from bondage from the southern states. Racial animosity towards free black men began to intensify with the influx of European immigrants. They didn't want to compete for work with the free blacks, so the government utilized the black codes to put the free blacks into bondage by utilizing the 13th Amendment. In 1825, Newgate Prison was 2/3 black, even though they were less than 10% of the population. Imprisonment allowed the government to use forced labor, so even if you escaped bondage in the South, you were criminalized and targeted for being an independent freeman and put back into government-sanctioned slavery. Lanson, who was an influential businessman, increasingly spoke for the black community and maintained working relationships with the area's leading white businessmen. Between 1824 and 1825, Lanson created and joined other prominent black citizens like Bias Stanley and Scipio Augustus to form the African United Ecclesiastical Society with the input from local white clergymen like Simeon Jocelyn and Leonard Bacon, and opened up New Haven's first black congregational church, which was a monumental thing at that time. The area that Lanson developed had over 150 black families. many that were employed by him. The area became desirable when Brewster opened a factory and wanted the land for his white workers. The white elite began to foreclose on the properties that William Lanson purchased. This was in conjunction with other developers that wanted that area for themselves, and white residents in tension with other developers that also wanted that area for themselves. White residents started to build mansions in the Wooster Square area, and tensions between the free whites and the free blacks competing for jobs continued. So the white elite of New Haven started a smear campaign about New Guinea in the black neighborhood. The biggest complaints white New Haven had was about the escaped African hostages that were flooding the city. They were angry that they haven't adjusted to the New England Puritan culture, and they did not approve of their presence and felt as if they were a burden on the New Haven society. William Lanson tried his best to be the welfare system for that community. So he provided jobs, he provided food, and provided housing so they won't be a big burden on the city. His famous hotel, which was later called the Hotel Liberia, had a fire in 1825. In 1826, William Lanson also launched the African Improvement Society and an associate temperance society. Organizations like these have been popping up amongst freed Africans in the South and the North. The purpose of these societies was to provide education and training for freed black men and women and escaped hostages so they can make a living for themselves and rehabilitate them from the horrible experience of human trafficking abuse and being kept as a hostage. Eventually, this group's aspiration went on to bigger things. William Lanson's engineering skills were second to none. So regardless that some New Haven elite looked down on him, he was still being contracted for major municipal projects. Here is William Frank Mitchell describing William Lanson's engineering feats that shaped how New Haven looks today.
I feel it my duty to notify the public of my prosperity in life during the first 40 years that I spent in this town. I hope to be excused as I can only give a small hint of my meaning in trying to show what I have done in this place. The actual labor and materials that went through my hands in building large jobs of stonework would amount to about $400,000. I built the biggest part of the East Haven Bridge and the steamboat wharves, and most of all the wharves and slips up to the head of Long Wharf, as well as repairing the Long Wharf. I then built the Basin Wharf, each wall of which is about 2,010 feet in length, 8 feet thick at bottom, 6 at top, and about 8 feet high. The large stones used in building it I got out of the solid rock in East Haven. I lost in building this wharf $2,600 at least, but I did not mention this to the contractors, as I think too much of a bargain to whine at all. I kept a livery stable about 15 years in the time, with an average of 20 horses and carriages, coaches and wagons of every description, and was much prospered for many years. I also came in possession of 12 houses and 1 acre of ground in a good part of the city, which I have been offered as good as $10,000 for, and the claims on this was about $27.
The historian Peter Hinks says that Lanson respected whites who respected him and deplored blaming crime on blacks when whites were there too, and felt blacks possessed inherent dignity and did not deserve special reprobation. And special reprobation means like the black codes, like laws that only pertain to them. This brought William Lanson great fortune and also great enemies. The white elite did not approve of the power that he amassed. His integration of the free blacks into New Haven society and housing of escaped hostages and expressing his black culture in defiance to the dominant culture made him a threat to the New Haven elites. They ramped up a smear campaign to ruin his reputation. They released newspaper articles reporting that his houses were gambling and party houses where the races integrated and drank liquor together. They labeled him a vice lord. William Lanson had to pay for ads in the newspaper to refute these allegations. In 1929, after losing much of his land to wealthy businessmen, he moved out of the area. Due to contract disputes and bad business dealings, William Lanson lost much of his property to the businessmen that became his enemies. But William Lanson was still determined, and he was still organizing to improve the life of the black people in New Haven. In 1830, his work with Yale graduate and Reverend Simeon Jocelyn has reached a climax. At the Negro Convention in Philadelphia, they accepted their plans for a black college of humanities and industries in New Haven. The college already had land and financial support from prominent businessmen and abolitionist Arthur Tappan, who was also a substantial donor to Yale University. When Jocelyn presented the idea to the New Haven government and citizens, it created an immediate violent backlash. Yale and the white citizens of New Haven did not want a population of educated black men. It would lower the morals of the city, threaten the white women residents and students, and also they didn't want them to compete for jobs once they graduated or create industries to employ the black citizens in New Haven. The mayor and the aldermen almost unanimously voted against the college. The newspaper ran slanderous articles about Simeon Jocelyn, and white residents and Yale students went to William Lanson's neighborhood in New Guinea and burnt down buildings and beat up white people that they found there integrating with the black residents. William Lanson was not stopped then. He tried again with Simeon Jocelyn to create an environment that promoted racial harmony. They created an integrated neighborhood called Spireworth, which is located in the present-day Hill neighborhood. They created 9 squares like the original colony and created a moral code to keep the harmony and peace among the residents. This time in Lanson's life became unstable. Him and his wife started undergoing health problems. His financial problems started catching up with him, and he had to liquidize a lot of his assets. The wealthy elite wanted to punish William Lanson for trying to advance the black people in New Haven and not going along with the American Colonization Society model of repatriation back to Africa. The slander escalated to an arrest in 1842 for allegedly running a house of ill repute, which means someone said they heard music, saw people dancing, and prostitution. These allegations were refuted, but the damage had already been done. He was incarcerated again after 2 male boarders got into an altercation with each other, leaving 1 man dead. Even though William Lanson wasn't responsible, he was still charged and sent to jail. These many attempts were used to limit his influence in the city. Eventually, William Lanson's health caught up with him, and he was no longer able to move. He was poor, and he died in a rooming house of gangrene in 1851. William Lanson was about solutions. Whenever he detected a conflict or a problem, he took responsibility. He did whatever it took to provide a solution to fix it. A true leader that was worthy of the title of king. Peace.
Thank you for listening to Young Adults Learning Evil. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Visit our Patreon page and learn how you can support and stay in tune with the movement. Till next time, peace.